Thank you for joining us on Dario Fair. Time is winding down as Congress works to pass their latest version of the Farm Bill, but divisions between Republicans in the House and Senate Democrats are creating challenges. The House unveiled its version of the bill on Friday. It cuts spending for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, by $27 billion over 10 years, cancels nearly $14 billion for climate practices provided by the 2020 Inflation Reduction Act, and reduces animal welfare protections. The Senate released a draft summary of its version earlier this month. It aims to crack down on China and other foreign entities purchasing U.S. farmland, and leaves nutrition funding and climate programs untouched. Wisconsin Senator Tammy Baldwin argues the U.S. should do a better job with tracking foreign ownership of American farmland, but her likely opponent, Eric Hovde, says there should only be restrictions for certain countries.
We really need to gain an understanding of who owns our agricultural land. I hope that when we finally arrive at a farm bill, that there are strong provisions.
I'm fine with friendly foreigners buying into our country as long as they're, focused on the good for our citizens. But I have a big problem with China, what they have been doing.
The House is set to take a markup vote on its version of the bill Thursday. I sat down with an expert on agricultural policy to talk about how the proposal will impact Wisconsin farmers. The House Agricultural Committee finally rolled out its version of the long-awaited Farm Bill. The $1.5 trillion draft proposal is set to boost safety net programs for farmers, among other provisions. The Senate is also set to unveil its version in the coming days. Joining us on the show today is Jason Mugnaini, the Executive Director of Government Relations for Wisconsin Farm Bureau Federation. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So I just want to talk a little bit about what provisions in this new draft of the legislation are you hoping to see?
Well, there's a handful of provisions that Wisconsin Farm Bureau has, tried to push because we're such a commodity diverse state. Really, things in the dairy space is really where we've worked on that. And fortunately enough, from what we've seen on both the Senate Ag Committee proposal summary and then the House Ag proposal, those two proposals seem pretty aligned on dairy. But then there's other provisions that we're paying very, very close attention to that still need to get worked out for a final farm bill. But we're excited that any movement on a farm bill is happening. I mean, getting this farm bill done is really a necessity to update and evolutionize the farm safety net. And as that's set to expire in September, those calls from farm country are really increasing.
And to your point, Jason, the 2018 Farm Bill expired and the Congress ultimately extended that for an additional year. Historically, this bill has been a bipartisan effort in Congress. How important is that aspect in the bill in ensuring that the legislation has kind of been able to move forward in previous sessions?
Well, with a Democratic majority in the Senate and a Republican majority in the House, that's the only way it's going to get done. And, historically, the Farm Bill has been the area to get consensus, but there's a couple of pieces that are still kind of sitting out there that need to get worked out. The biggest fights right now are probably in the nutrition assistance side as well as conservation funding. There's a handful of provisions like reference prices on the Farm Bill side, on the farm side of the Farm Bill, but hopefully we can get those all worked out here in the next couple of weeks.
One of those provisions really focuses on conservation efforts and sustainability for farmers. But we see that Democrats are wanting to see more guardrails on those provisions and that funding versus Republicans are trying to open up those programs for farmers. And I just want to know from your perspective, what are farmers wanting to see in terms of that farmer?
Well, Wisconsin's kind of unique. We've really seen an adoption of conservation practices kind of explode here. There's a lot of opportunity in this space in a lot of different ways. I think on the House proposal, they want to see conservation practices included, but they're kind of pulling that Inflation Reduction Act money, that $20 billion into the Farm Bill, and making it more about conservation generally, where Chairman Stabenow has said that this is in the Senate has said this is a red line for her. She wants to see that IRA funding made permanent, and that those practices really focus on climate smart activities. So there's a difference of opinion, but I think both versions really want to push conservation, water quality, carbon intensity, those types of things. So we're seeing that there's general consensus amongst agriculture to continue to allow those voluntary practices to continue, but the method to how to get there is still up for debate.
Jason, I want to go back to something that you said earlier in our conversation about SNAP benefits, the funding and the requirements that they're trying to introduce in this new farm bill. How much of that with SNAP and the other, funding that they're trying to allocate towards those resources impacts farmers?
So in the farm bill, 80% of the farm bill is actually nutrition assistance. Mm-hmm. So in the House Ag proposal, there is some restrictions on USDA to update expenditures within the Thrifty Food Plan. That's about a $28 billion impact depending on how that's structured. For key Democratic members, they've said don't touch that. The challenge with this is that for some of those Senate Republicans, that might be the pathway for them to support a farm bill and get those votes over the hump. But then conversely, for Democratic members, they don't want to see cuts to nutrition assistance. So this is always going to continue to be a challenge for the farm bill, in years past and going forward. On nutrition assistance, but we're not talking about the largest portion of the pie. We're talking about something relatively small that we're still kind of debating over. In the Senate Ag proposal, there are some reporting and auditing requirements that are included in that. There may be some pathway of a kind of a mix of the two that might help progress things forward on the nutrition assistance side, but kind of we'll see how things happen and unfold on Thursday regarding those provisions in the markup vote for the House Ag proposal.
And I think it's a very interesting conversation on how impactful this decision will be on lawmakers in terms of their districts and how they vote.
Yes, and the Ag Census data was just recently broken down by congressional district, and Wisconsin, of our 8 congressional districts, 5 are in the top 100 nationally. The most agriculturally intensive district in Wisconsin, the 3rd congressional district in Southwest and the western side of the state, is number 17 nationally, and in dairy it's like 4th, and in potatoes it's 3rd. So we've got a lot of heavy ag here in Wisconsin. And as legislators look at that vote, keeping that in mind is really going to be at forefront as the Farm Bill progresses.
Jason Mugnaini, Wisconsin Farm Bureau Federation, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We appreciate you for your time. Farmers on the front lines of the climate change conversation, the study that shows just how aware they are of the crisis and the climate-focused practices they've adopted.